appreciate you taking time out of a busy schedule, particularly the members. We've got a lot of committee meetings going on today, and including appropriations. And Madam Chair, I appreciate you letting me chair this meeting today. You know that pre-K is my passion, but I heard you say this earlier today that...
No, we're all very passionate about this. We fight over who's going to get to chair this meeting today because it's something we really are excited about, and he won. So, Mr. Chairman.
I don't know if I won, if it was a gift, but thank you very much. I appreciate it. And we've got a lot going on today. And one thing that I heard you say, Madam Chair, earlier is that everybody in this room is always family. You know, it's wonderful to be surrounded by people who care as much as you do about a particular issue. But understand that the budget is what the budget is, and we've all scraping for the same dollars. And today we're here mainly to talk about finding facts and reaching out and collecting data. We hope that it'll make a case for us in the future as far as what we think the importance of pre-K is. And before we get started, I'm going to ask Representative Kendrick, if she would, to open us in prayer. Thank you. I don't want to embarrass anybody, but I've got some people from my district here. Glad to have you. Today we've got two special guests. We have Mr. Bobby Cagle, who is the Commissioner of Bright Start. He was appointed by the Governor Deal just recently, and prior to that, I believe you were DCA, is that right? DFLAX, okay. So he's been able to look at challenges for our youth and our children for quite some time from a different angle. We're glad to have him today. We also have Miss Stephanie Blank with us, and I'll introduce her later as when it becomes time. And Bobby, we're going to let you get started today, and again, we look forward to hearing from you and the data that you've already gathered and what the plans are for the future, and we'll have a few questions when you're done. Thank you.
Committee members, y'all come over on this side so that you can see the PowerPoint. If there are chairs available, kind of direct your colleagues if you can. You don't want to look at my head? No.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you so much for allowing us to come be with you today to talk about something that's so very important to the children in the state and also to the future economy of the state of Georgia. My name is Bobby Cagle. I'm the Commissioner of Bright from the Start, Georgia's Department of Early Care and Learning. Just to tell you a little bit about DECAL, as we call it, we're responsible for Georgia's pre-K program. In addition to that, we also are responsible for child care program licensing. We license and oversee over 10,000 providers statewide. We also administer the Federal Child and Nutrition Program and Summer Food Programs, which I think I've sent an announcement to all members to see if you had additional people in your districts that could serve as outlets for those programs. Last year we served 88.3 million meals through those two programs collectively. We also administer federal quality dollars, and those dollars are aimed at the birth to 5 population to assure that we're providing good quality care, not just in pre-K, but also in our daycare homes and other facilities around the state that care for children. Want to introduce to you on my left Susan Adams. Susan Adams is the Acting Assistant Commissioner for Pre-K. On my right is Dr. Bentley Ponder. He's our Director of Research and Evaluation. I'm going to split up the presentation with them so I don't put you to sleep. We are going to talk with you, and I'll begin talking about just the general pre-K history and some facts about the program. That'll be followed by Dr. Ponder, who will talk about our research, and then Susan will close us out with some information about our pre-K program today and access and quality, and we'll also be available for questions if you have those. As some of you know, this program actually started in the early 1990s as a program that served 750 at-risk children across the state. The program was changed to a universal program in 1995, and I'm oftentimes asked what universal means. Universal means that it's available to everyone. It does not, unfortunately, mean that we have slots for every child that would benefit from it. However, hopefully we're moving somewhat in that direction. Each year we've continued to increase slots, and we served our millionth child in 2010, a huge celebration around that. We continue to work very diligently to raise standards and quality while remaining a national leader in those areas. We also are working very closely with providers to achieve those ends. Pre-K is available in all 159 counties in a variety of settings. We have both private providers that provide the service. We also have schools that provide the service. And in many of our counties, the schools are the only provider in some of the more remote counties. This is actually something that makes us unique in the nation. Amongst the programs that provide universal care, to have school systems and private providers providing the services is very unique. Most of the programs actually have school system as the only provider. We also are serving about 58% of eligible 4-year-olds statewide, and out of the 155,000 children who are 4 years old in the state, we're serving about 84,000 of those currently. We're in 68 counties serving 70% or more of the children that are eligible. We are very proud to say that with the work of the department and also the provider community, Georgia ranks third in the country for the percentage of 4-year-olds served, and also in the top 10 for high quality standards. Oklahoma, Florida, and New York are also states that have universal pre-K programs, and you can see the percentages of 4-year-olds that are served in those areas. Of course, we probably serve more than Oklahoma in a given year. Florida and New York probably also serve more than we do, but in a variety of different settings. And their programs include part day and full day programs that parents can select from. Bentley Ponder will share with you some pre-K research information.
Thank you, Commissioner. It's not too often that you bring your data person out, so it's an honor for me to be here. I'm going to start and talk about some of the research that really underpins the pre-K program. And I think to do that, you have to start with the brain development research. We don't, always acknowledge it, but, science has really exploded in this domain within the last 15 to 20 years. And the understanding of brain development has really taught us two things. First of all, and for anyone who works with children, we all know this, but the brain development in those early years is really exponential. It's amazing how quickly children's brains grow. And that if we want to improve outcomes for children later on in life and even as adults, then we have to look at those early years as really that foundation. And part of that foundation is having high quality early experiences. This graph right here, and don't worry, I won't bore you with a lot of graphs. I think I just have two, so this is the first one. But this is from the Hart and Risley research, and it's referenced, and you'll see in the reference there, a science-based framework for early childhood policy. This is a website, and it's probably the best website I've seen that takes good science and brings it down to a general public level. So that's where this graph comes from, and it shows that by age 3, the difference in vocabulary growth based on socioeconomic status. When I'm teaching my family course at Georgia State, I always talk, if you want to know one of the best proxies for where children are, you look at mother's education and socioeconomic status. And this research this graph really shows us what we know with that. We talk a lot about the importance of early education, but I don't think we talk enough about that. To have those impacts and to really see those long-term goals met, it has to be high quality. It's not just enough to have a program. It has to be a program that's made of high quality. High quality typically includes your skilled and educated teachers And as we all know, the most important relationship in quality is the relationship between a teacher and child. Small class sizes, age-appropriate curricula, a language-rich environment, and then warm and responsive interactions. And the interaction piece hits on that relationship between a teacher and student. And then there's been a lot of, we talk about pre-K and at the end of the early education spectrum, but it's also the beginning of elementary school and beyond. And there's been some great research that shows that when you have a good PK to third grade approach, and that means integrating the high quality that we have in pre-K with later grades as well, then you have those good outcomes by third grade. And I'm using third grade as an example because I know that's a benchmark in Georgia, and it's also where a lot of the research has rested. We talk a lot about the return on investment. And I'll point here in the first bullet that to get that high return on investment, then you have to have, again, high quality. And when you have a high quality program, research has shown us that later on in life, you see increased earnings for participants. We see public savings due to reduced crime. And then we also see for our school systems and beyond a reduced need for remedial education, rehabilitation, and treatment. So those savings go on through adulthood and are also not just benefits to individuals, but benefits to society as well. The last bullet there came from a meta-analysis that looked at a bunch of different studies and the return on investment and found that school systems can save between $2,600 and $4,400 over a child's K-12 experience just for each additional child served in pre-K. One of my favorite studies to quote, and the commissioner mentioned that, and Oklahoma is a really good state to compare to because a lot of the same quality characteristics are in both programs. Both are universal and both serve a large percentage of 4-year-olds. A study in Oklahoma, and I put that first bullet up there, powerful research design, because they were able to conduct this research without using a control group. They used children's birth dates to come up with the outcomes. So I think it's important because in a state like Georgia, you don't want to deny children services to conduct a research study, and Oklahoma has been able to do that. But they found that participation in the pre-K program was a more powerful predictor of pre-reading and pre-writing test outcomes than key socioeconomic indicators, including mother's and father's education and whether or not the child qualified for free or reduced lunch. And in the Oklahoma research, that free or reduced lunch is usually used as one of the socioeconomic variables. And the research also found that the state program was more beneficial than traditional child care and was also more beneficial in language and literacy than the Head Start program. Now, Head Start had more benefits on the family support piece. So there are different ways, both programs have different strengths, but the research was fairly conclusive that there were definitely more benefits than traditional child care. The last study that we were able to do in Georgia that looked at Georgia pre-K and specific child outcomes was conducted between 2001 and 2004 through Georgia State University. And this is a graph that shows for a pre-K sample the gains they made. And these are gains that are above what you would expect a child to make on a typical developmental trajectory. Sorry, that's sometimes hard to say. So these are gains that we can attribute to participation in the program. So you'll see there receptive vocabulary and expressive language, two key pieces that we know are indicative of a child's later school success. We were able to see enormous gains coming close to the national average in a year of pre-K. The last study that we did in Georgia that looked at quality, and this was a study that was released last year. It's done through Frank Porter Graham at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and they're really the national experts at looking at early education quality. And so we did a study where they came in. It didn't measure child outcomes, but it looked at quality across pre-K and other child care settings. And what we found in the study was the quality results for Georgia pre-K classrooms were higher than those for non-Georgia pre-K classrooms, and especially higher than infant-toddler findings. And in that study, which is on our website, the infant-toddler care findings were low. And a different presentation, we can talk about some of our initiatives that are targeting those. But the quality was higher in Georgia pre-K. The researchers conclude that the pre-K program has many strengths that form a foundation. They also found that there were some key interaction areas where we have areas to improve. And Susan's going to talk in just a second. This slide is meant as a segue to her her piece, some of the things that we're doing in pre-K to maintain that quality and improve the interactions between teachers and children. And then the study also found that with pre-K and child care in Georgia, the results were similarly to national studies of other programs as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to Susan.
I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about what Georgia Pre-K looks like today, the services that our children are getting, and the improvements that we're doing to the program. This first slide talks about access, and it really focuses on the cornerstones of the Georgia Pre-K program. And they also focus on the things that Bentley talked about that are the high-quality aspects of a program. One of the things is Georgia Pre-K is built on parent choice. One of the things that we offer is that we want parents to be able to choose a program that best fits the needs of their family. For some parents, that is a local child care provider, or maybe they have a younger sibling that's attending there. It could also be a school system that provides transportation. It could be a program that's close to where they work. So the needs of families with young children vary, and we want to be able to offer that parent choice piece. Then also the public-private partnership. We're offering parents the choice of either to look at a public school for services or a private program. When you look at public programs, those are local school systems, but there are also other public entities like military bases, technical schools, and colleges and universities that offer the program. So it's really made to fit the needs of families. And then also that high-quality aspect that Bentley was talking about. It's not enough that children have a preschool experience. It has to be a high-quality experience to link to those outcomes. And one of the things Georgia Pre-K has is that we do have those indicators for high quality. We have we meet the ratio for teachers and students. The teachers have the credentials. They have the ongoing professional development, the things that are going to be able to link to high quality. And then we also, our program is universal. When we look at the Georgia Pre-K program, it was made to be a universal program. And what that means is any child that is 4 by September 1st and who sleeps in Georgia, whose family lives in Georgia, is eligible for the program. This is one of the keystones that we think is really important to the program because all children benefit from a high-quality preschool experience. Now, research will tell us that children from a disadvantaged background, children in poverty or children with other indicators, they're going to make more progress, but they have more progress to make. All children benefit from that. The other thing that research tells us is that it is our middle income families that have the least access to high quality child care. Just because a parent may be able to afford child care doesn't mean that the options in their area are going to be high quality. And when we look at high quality, that's what's going to link to children's outcomes. We also, when we look at means-based testing, depending on what is chosen there to select who participates, then the working poor may or may not be included in that. So universality is one of the things that we feel is very important to preserve with the program. I know that you've been paying attention to the proposed budget cuts that the governor put out today in his press conference. One of the things that his cuts do is they look at preserving these aspects of the program: parent choice, universality, and the public-private partnership. And also allows us to continue to focus on high quality. A couple other things to know about the program. This is by the numbers, the pre-K program. We do serve 84,000 slots, and we keep our program full. We run at about a 99% fill rate if you look at that. And we also serve a little over 4,000 classes in about 2,000 sites across the state. And then you'll look down the breakdown for public-private is pretty split right there. And then one thing to note here that's important is that 57 of our counties serve only children in public schools. So as we look at access for children, it's important to maintain that public-private partnership, because we do offer the program in all of the counties in Georgia, but there are some areas where there isn't licensed child care. So so we need for the public schools to serve those children and for our Head Start programs to serve those children. And there are also 11 11 counties that don't have licensed child care in them at all. And then the other thing is that we do have 15 counties that the children are only served in private. They're only served in child care centers. Many times those are counties where the public schools don't have capacity. So they don't have room in their public school buildings to serve the pre-K children. So in those counties, children are only served in private child care centers. So as we look at the balance there, it's important to make sure to maintain access for all families, that we're maintaining that public-private partnership. Couple of points about quality. Georgia Pre-K instruction is all based on standards. We have the Georgia Pre-K content standards that are aligned with the Georgia performance standards for kindergarten. We also have curricula that we have about 35 curriculums that programs can choose from. About every 5 years we do a call for proposals for curriculums, and the curriculums are actually evaluated out of state, not by our office, and we have an approved set of curriculums programs can use. Where teachers are basing their instruction is on the standards. And instruction should be individualized for children based on the assessment that teachers are doing. So we do allow them to have a variety of curriculum choices. All pre-K programs do use a standardized assessment, which is based on authentic assessment of children. And then, of course, we talked about class size and ratios. Pre-K programs are funded for classroom materials. And then also they have ongoing professional development, which is going to be the piece for teachers that links to those child outcomes. As we look at the professional development for Georgia Pre-K, a couple of different things. We do require that our teachers have a minimum of a 4-year bachelor's degree in early childhood education. We offer ongoing training that's paid for by our department every year for all teachers and assistant teachers. And then we have on-site monitoring of each program where we're looking at not only the teacher's professional development, but also are the providers meeting the requirements of their grant. So are they fiscally responsible, and are they meeting their grant requirements? Couple of things to look at as we look at professional development and maintaining quality. One of the things that Bentley talked about with the study that was recently done by the Frank Porter Graham Institute was that they said Georgia Pre-K classes look really good. They're warm, inviting places for children. They have great materials. Teachers are working and interacting with children every day. But what they said was that we really need to look at the interactions between children and teachers and focus on those interactions, because that's going to be where we make the greatest difference for child outcomes. This is not unlike what they see in other preschool programs across the nation, and not unlike the research for K to 3rd grade classes. Where we need to improve is the interactions between teachers and children in classrooms. So Pre-K has taken a giant step in how we work with teachers and implemented a new professional development tool that's called the CLASS. It's the Classroom Level Assessment Scoring System. And this instrument is directly linked to what's going on in the classroom between teachers and children. It's looking where we're observing to look and see, are teachers building vocabulary in students? Are they asking those higher order thinking questions? Are they focusing on language and literacy development? All those things that are going to be important for children to be ready for kindergarten, and those things that are going to link to higher child outcomes. Pre-K is really on the cutting edge of this instrument and being able to use it in all of our pre-K classes. So this is the next big step for professional development for teachers. This year, all of our Georgia pre-K classes are receiving an observation using the CLASS instrument, and then they'll be getting feedback about what was seen in their classroom, and then we'll be tailoring professional development based on their needs using that. So as we look at that, those are the next steps If you look at this graph, this is an important piece to look at. This is not data specifically about Georgia. This is national data looking at the interactions from the class instrument. And as you look at this, what it tells us nationally is that programs pre-K through third, not just pre-K, they do pretty well in the first two domains of the class, which is emotional support and then also classroom organization. Those are the things that they saw, Freight Porter Graham saw in Georgia pre-K classes, that children were interacting, that children were safe, that children were having a positive experience, that teachers were doing a good job pacing their instruction, that children were on task and that they were learning. But it's this third key piece of the instructional support for all programs. This is national data that we really need to focus on. And this looks at the interactions between teachers and children and looking at how are teachers engaging children in instruction. So as we look at nationally where we need to focus, Georgia Pre-K is right there, and we've already taken the steps to help our teachers make those critical changes in their instruction so they're engaging children in those interactions every day. So as we look at where Georgia Pre-K is going, this is the next piece of quality, not just for Pre-K, but it's what we're hearing nationally needs to be done in Pre-K through third grade classes. A couple other things going on that we thought you might be interested in is that we are participating in Race to the Top. We have about $1.4 million out of Race to the Top, and what we'll be looking at there is using the class instrument with pre-K classes through all the way to third grade to look at the professional development that we use with teachers and tracking those kids to see the difference that that type of professional development has on student outcomes, that intensely looking at interactions. So that's the piece of Race to Top while we're engaging there. The other thing is, of course, we're looking at upcoming, we'll be having some listening sessions and some focus groups with providers, with key stakeholders, parents and families, so we can talk to them about the changes with pre-K. So that's kind of where we are today. Okay, we often get the question with Georgia Pre-K is, do Georgia Pre-K teachers teach reading? Sometimes there's sometimes we even hear we're discouraged from teaching reading. One of the things that we want people to know is that Georgia Pre-K teachers are teaching reading instruction every day. When you go in a pre-K class and you see children talking, you see children interacting, you see teachers reading to children, we're forming that foundation for literacy instruction. When children are singing nursery rhymes and they're playing with words, then they're learning that language make sounds, and those sounds make letters and words. One of the things that you're going to see in a pre-K class is that children come into pre-K at many different levels. Some children come in and are ready to read. Some children come in and they're not ready to read. So as we look at the curriculum and the standards for pre-K and the assessment, what we expect to see from teachers and we see happening in classrooms is you may go in and you may have a group of 1 or 2 children sitting on the floor and they may be stringing large beads. Well, those children are working on small muscle development. They need to learn to get their fingers ready to be able to be ready to hold a pencil to be able to write. And that's where some children are. But in that same classroom, you should also expect to see there may be a teacher sitting with a group of children with books. And those children are beginning to read, and they're identifying the letters that they know in the book, and they're reading the words that they know. So when you go in a Georgia pre-K classroom, it may be different than what we may expect to see. 4-year-olds actually don't have inner speech. When you look at something and you think in your head about what's going on, young children don't develop that till they're about the age of 6. So what you should see and hear in a Georgia pre-K class is if they're learning, they're talking, they're moving, and they're interacting. Without that piece, the young children aren't learning because they don't have the ability to think about it in their head. So when the question is asked, is Georgia Pre-K teaching reading? Yes, every day. But reading instruction looks very different for a young child, and it's going to happen in many different ways. So we invite you to go in a pre-K class and watch what's going on. You should see many children learning and getting reading instruction in a lot of different ways.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Bobby. And I'm sorry, what was your name? Bentley. I really appreciate you coming today, and great presentation. I can tell you're as passionate about this as we are, and that's who we want in those positions, and we appreciate you very much. I'll open the floor for questions if anybody has a question. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. I think my question is to Bentley. Bentley, what do we know of the instructional time impacts children learning in pre-K?
Okay. That's a great question. I would say where I would go would be some of the Oklahoma research, again, and that's done out of Georgetown University. What we have seen is that they have looked at, compared their full-day program to their half-day program. Now, keep in mind, a full-day program in Oklahoma is 6 hours. A half-day is 2.5 hours. So, it's a little bit different than what has been proposed here. For your middle-class children, it doesn't seem to make much of a difference. You still see impacts with a half day as you do with full day. In fact, there was one piece of Gormley's research that actually showed a little bit less impacts with the full day for your middle class children. When you look at more of a targeted population, which looks at whether or not they're eligible for free or reduced lunch, then the impacts are greater with the full day program.
And a follow-up to that has to do with, we talk about lots about high quality in this presentation,
Right.
and numbers of interactions and the quality of those interactions. If we cut 2.5 hours out of a school day, what are we cutting out in terms of numbers of interactions between a teacher and a student? Do we have a study that tells us what the average number of interactions is in an hour?
Well, actually, part of the Frank Porter Graham study used a tool called the snapshot, where it looked at what was, the actual interactions that were going on. And there was a good deal of time in that was dealt with your basic routines. That was, and in many places it's going to the bathroom, it's lining up for lunch, it's those pieces. And what we've been working with teachers on are using those times also for key instruction as well. So in other words, there's a lot of times that spend in routines that could be used for instruction. Do I know exactly how many interactions happen per hour? No, and I don't recall that being as part of that particular study. Do I know how many interactions would be lost between, if you shorten the day and you take out nap time and you take out certain meals? No, I don't know that. Susan, do you want to add anything?
I'd like to, if I could, emphasize the fact that we are saying, based on the news release this morning, that it's half day, but in reality it's not a half day. We're not going to half days. But also the governor has allowed additional dollars to be spent on the lower income families, which you yourself just said are the ones that are critical and get the most out of the additional time that's spent every day in the pre-K. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. We have another question? I believe Spencer was next. Representative Spencer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I noticed that you all will be participating in Race to the Top, and are there any national standards or national initiatives that will be required to adhere to in order to receive the Race to the Top money?
And I'm sorry, the Race to the Top expert did not come with us today, and as a matter of fact, I'm leaving here to go to an education agency head meeting where Race to the Top is going to be discussed. So hopefully the next time we talk, I will be able to give you that information. We will also be glad to collect the information and provide it to you after the meeting.
And Representative Babcock.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This question is for you, Bentley. You said that the data that you're looking at is based on birth date. Is there any comparison data that shows children that have not been in pre-K versus children that are, so that we're not looking at improvements that a school system may have made to their curriculum that raises the scores?
Right. That's a great question. What I was talking about, in Oklahoma, they did, and I'll try not to get real technical here, but they used what was called a regression discontinuity design. And so they used the actual age, a cutoff date. So in Georgia, that's September 1st. And by doing so, they were able to compare same-age children who attended the program versus same-age children who did not attend the program because they'll attend the next year. And so when they look at the gains from that year, then they're able to attribute those gains to the children who attended. A lot of the classic studies, Perry Preschool, Abecedarian that we talk about, they use, a random design. They put a group of children together, you get the program, you don't. Obviously, in Georgia, that would be difficult to do, and frankly, I think a little unethical to do. So this is a way to get around from having to do a pure random sample by using the birthdays as a cutoff. So they are comparing children who did receive the service to children who did not receive the service. It's just using the birth dates as that research measure.
How do they cull out? I don't understand how they culled out the ones that didn't participate.
Well, because the one, I know it is, it took me a while to grasp it too. They were able to, these are all children who are attending the program or who will attend the program. I mean, the Georgia State piece that I showed you that looked at children and the gains they made in pre-K, part of the problem with that research design, and it was really what we could do at that time, was that all parents selected the program. So, parent selection can be a factor in doing research. By using a group of children who all had, their parents were selecting the program, they were just, some of them missed it because their birth date, they'll get it the next year. But they're technically the same age children. So you would expect the same developmental progression with those children as you would children who attended the program. So they measure them at the beginning of the year, and they measure both groups at the end of the year, and are able to attribute the larger gains made by the ones that were intended pre-K to the program.
And they're doing that in third grade?
No, this was done at pre-K. Pre-K, and then they followed those children through kindergarten. Was the last piece that I've seen that's come out of Oklahoma.
Okay.
So,
You said y'all was testing with them in third grade? You're taking the testing from the standardized testing.
I quoted some research that looks at pre-K to third grade. That's more national research. The specific Oklahoma right now is just going, I think the last published piece has been when the children exited kindergarten. And that was done in 2008.
Would you please go back to slide 14? I think this may be the question you were asking.
This one right here?
That slide there, I see that it shows a progression between the start and the end, but how does that compare to those who did not go to pre-K? Because obviously there would be some learning.
This one does not. It just compares children that were in
So, but do you have any research that shows the difference between the two?
Right now, not in Georgia. Now, this study right here, there was a sample of children that were in Head Start, and there was a sample of children who were in private preschool. But again, you have the parent selection piece here. We didn't randomly say to this child, you go to a private program, you go to Head Start, you go to pre-K. This was looking at, just 3 different groups of children in 3 different programs, or 3 different types of programs within the same year. All we see in this slide here are the pre-K children. There is a piece in that report, and it came out of Georgia State under Gary Henry, that looked at where you would see the gains made for children in Head Start and the gains made for children in private preschool. I can just tell you, the gains for private preschool were not as steep, but they started out well above the children that were in pre-K and Head Start. The gains for children in Head Start also were significant, but weren't at the same level as the gains in pre-K.
So part of our data gathering going forward would be to actually find out those who don't go to pre-K where
Exactly.
where their score
would be to look at doing a longitudinal study.
And Representative Bell, got a question?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to go back to the slide that talked about the average national ratings of interactions. I believe it's slide number 21, and specifically where it talks about instructional support showing in low quality. And I'm thinking about this in terms of if we're cutting the day, how do we propose that we will increase those particular numbers? Would that be based on curriculum, delivery of services, or is that strictly on professional development for the teachers?
As we look at the third domain there of instructional support, that specifically looks at the interactions between teachers and children and the kind of quality of interactions that they have. So it's looking at the vocabulary development of those children. It's looking at higher order thinking skills and the types of questions that teachers are asking. So as we look at that, a big piece of that will be professional development that we're offering to teachers so that they know how to make the most of every story time, every interaction one-on-one with children, every interaction with children in small groups, so that they'll know those questions to ask and how to extend the children's thinking and how to get the children to be talking and to enhance their vocabulary. So this piece really looks at helping teachers understand how to maximize their interactions with kids.
Thank you.
I believe we have one last question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Susan, I wanted to ask you if you said earlier that the curriculum for these classes are prepared out of state. So my question is, why is that? Why don't we prepare that in state? And secondly, with the governor's new plan that will reduce the number of hours, what will be done to the curriculum to modify it so that the quality of the curriculum is still there, even though there may be less frequency in the number of interactions?
Okay, let me clarify the piece on curriculum. What we do is that we look at instruction for pre-K is driven by the standards, just like instruction for K through 12. The standards for what children should be learning at that age or that grade are how teachers should be assessing children and planning instruction. A curriculum is a support to those standards, and what Georgia Pre-K does is that we have a call for proposal where publishers submit their curriculums to be reviewed to be used in a Georgia Pre-K class. And what they have to show us is how their curriculum supports the standards for Georgia, and these are Georgia standards, how their curriculum supports our assessment program, and then they're evaluated. The reason they're evaluated typically out of state is because it doesn't need to be our department that's evaluating the curriculums and these publishers. Then they come back with us with recommendations. They evaluate the programs based on a rubric that we set up, and then we contract that out, and then we come back and then we approve, look at approving curriculum that they can use. On our website, if you're interested, there's about 35 curriculum that are available. The curriculum for early childhood has really exploded over the last couple years with the interest in research around brain development and the interest in early childhood. So there are a lot more choices of curriculum. The reason we offer a choice of curriculum is that then programs can look at those curricula. We know that all of those curriculum are teaching our standards and that they're going to help teachers use assessment to make instructional choices, but then they can look at the curriculums and choose the one that's going to best meet their instruction and best meet their program. Does that help?
What?
And then will you be resetting the rubric by which you're going to send out for the next curriculum?
As we,
Given the shortened day.
One of the things we'll be looking at, and one of the things that's already happening with the department, is that for standards in Georgia, we are already looking at the doing an alignment study with standards. We had the opportunity to use some stimulus dollars to look at all the standards birth through third grade in Georgia. And we have an alignment study going on right now that looks at how do the different sets of standards that are set up for Georgia. There's the Georgia Early Learning Standards for children 0 to 3. There's the pre-K content standards for Georgia pre-K, and then of course the kindergarten Georgia performance standard. The other thing that factors in here too are the new Common Core standards. So right now we have a study that is being finished up right now that'll come back to us and look at how does the alignment for all of those standards work. Where are there places that we may need to go back and redo standards? And then part of our work with them is certainly we will be talking to them about the impact of a 4-hour day and how that would look at how we would use those standards. So that work is happening already in Georgia.
One last question, short question, a short answer, please.
Sure. Well, I have two short questions, if I may. One is how I understand there's 58% of children are being served that are eligible. How many, and maybe you said this, I missed it, how many are being turned away? And the second question is, the biggest thing I'm wrestling with, and you've already touched on this, I find this very interesting, thank you for this program today, but is how much, I understand there's benefits to the higher socioeconomic, statuses, but children at that level, but how much benefit is there? Is it minuscule or?
Take it. When we look at how many children are not being served, we have about 10,000 children on a waiting list. Those are children that are interested in the program, but were not able to be served this year.
That with the governor's new proposal that we're going to pick up an additional 5,000. Is that correct?
In response to your second question, and I'll do my best to be quick, the gains are smaller for your higher socioeconomic status, generally looked at in standard deviation, so it would be probably less than half the standard deviation, whereas sometimes for your targeted or lower socioeconomic groups, you would have a higher standard deviation gain. One of the things, though, that we haven't talked about is for a targeted population, though, the gains are larger when they're in a universal setting. So there's that peer interaction piece. Children learn from their peers. They learn from that interaction. So many times the gains in a pre-K program that's universal may be higher than a targeted program because you have different groups of children interacting together.
Say how much I appreciate all of you coming today, and I don't know about the rest of you, but I feel like I just got a drink of water from a fire hydrant. But but it obviously that you are very passionate about this, and let's please give them a hand. Thank you for taking time to come. Guest I'd like to introduce is Miss Stephanie Blank, and Stephanie is again very passionate about early childhood learning, and she's a native of North Carolina. She's got children of her own. She is an advocate for children, and she serves on several boards, including the Camp Sunshine. She's board of on the Emory University Board of Visitors, and she is the Waldorf Arts Center and Atlanta Symphony Orchestra. She's also served on the Tourism Task Force for Governor's Commission on New Georgia, among many, many other things, Children's Health Care and Atlanta Foundation, Board of Trustees, and it goes on, and we'd love to have. Thank you for coming today, and appreciate you being here, and I'm going to let you, Stephanie, take the program in whichever way you see fit. Thank you.
That could be dangerous. Already. Well, good afternoon, everyone. As Representative Pruitt mentioned, my name is Stephanie Blank. I'm the chair of GEARS, and for those of you who don't know about GEARS, we are the Georgia Early Education Alliance for Ready Students. We are the only group solely working on just early childhood issues statewide, and I want to thank you for allowing me to be here today. I think Commissioner Cagle has walked out, but I want to thank him for his leadership and willingness to work with us in such a collaborative manner. And thanks to all of you as well for your dedication to our children. GEARS was created to lead the charge in our state around issues of early childhood. We want to help activate the voices of the business, parent, and legislative communities around why early childhood is such a smart investment. We want all of our children to enter into kindergarten ready to learn and reading to learn by 3rd grade. And GEARS wants to be a resource in working with you and other partners to achieve this goal. So I'm here today not only as the GEARS chair, but also as the mother of 3, as a taxpayer who's concerned about how we spend our dollars, and as a citizen of Georgia, concerned about the workforce we eventually create in this state. As you heard from Commissioner Cagle, there is no doubt that high-quality early learning has a lasting and positive effect on our children from an educational and a social-emotional standpoint. These effects translate into significant cost savings to our state. According to a soon-to-be-released report by the Southern Education Foundation, Georgia pre-K resulted in almost 10,000 children not needing to repeat a grade. That's a savings of almost $37 million. I want to repeat that. $37 million saved because children didn't have to repeat a grade. And one thing that I would like to talk about with early childhood is that, what's going on, as they mentioned earlier, may not look like the normal type of learning, but the social emotional piece is critical, because the number one reason why a child is held back in kindergarten or first grade hasn't anything to do sometimes with their cognitive abilities. They may be able to know their numbers and to know their alphabet, but it's the social emotional piece that gets them in trouble, and they're classified as not mature enough to go on to first or second grade sometimes. So we can't discount that social emotional piece that's also happening in our early learning environments and the cost savings associated with that. And while we don't have the data in our state around special education savings, other states from Louisiana to Oklahoma to Pennsylvania and more have all shown special ed reductions ranging anywhere from 20 to 50% for children who were in high quality pre-K. Now, the best data that I could find says we're spending about $13,000 a student in special ed in Georgia. You think about the savings that would result from 20 to 50% of those kids not requiring special ed. So the truth of the matter is that our Georgia pre-K gives a lot of bang for a little buck. The $4,226 we spend per child in pre-K is more than realized in later cost savings to our state. We hear much in the media today about the cost of Hope and pre-K, but in 17 years, the per-child expenditure has only gone up $226 a child. That's a 5.6% increase in 17 years. In contrast, tuition at UGA rose 151%, Georgia State 214%, and Albany State 114%. In 1995, when pre-K became universal, 58% of lottery funds went to support it. Today, it's only 32%. And from 2000 to 2011, 22,000 pre-K slots were added. During that same time period, approximately 118,000 students qualified for Hope. The point of all of this is not to make Hope the enemy, but it's to point out that pre-K is not the reason for the escalating costs. In the folders we've provided, you'll find some helpful charts, and they look like this, that illustrate the point. If we really want to do what's in the best interest of our youngest learners long term, we need to unshackle pre-K from Hope and think about what the costs are of pre-K on its own merits and for what it's accomplishing for our youngest learners. The out-of-control cost of Hope shouldn't penalize the efforts of our pre-K. I also think it's important to understand who the families are that benefit from pre-K. 80% of our Georgia families who have a child in pre-K have an income of $60,000 or less. 80% of them have an income of $60,000 or less. Not only does pre-K provide a benefit to our children, but to our families as well, allowing them to be productive members of the workforce while knowing their kids are in a learning and healthy environment. We know that Governor Deal also gets why early childhood education is important, and we are appreciative of his willingness to work with us. We are still studying his proposal that was announced today, and while some of our concerns have been addressed, such as increased funds for at-risk kids, we do have some concerns about the ability of half-day pre-K to maintain the high standard of quality necessary to put our kids on a path to succeed. The studies we have found show that the greatest gains made by the children who need it most, and as we mentioned, 80% of our families in pre-K are making under $60,000. Those come from full-day programs. We also have concerns about the ability to retain the best teachers if they're only working a shortened day. In addition to these long-term funding concerns, as well as providing enough slots at the high level of quality that's required, I have another grave concern, and that's about the understanding of this issue, not only just in our citizens, but here at this Capitol as well. Too often I hear things like, well, what difference does it make? They're just little kids. Or this is just fancy babysitting. Or these are kids that should be at home. But the truth of the matter is over 60% of our children are in care outside of their home. And if we care about what's going to happen in K through 12 investment, and we are pouring a boatload of money into that, then we need these kids ready to learn the moment they hit the door in kindergarten. We also need to know that even if it was just really, really terrific babysitting, as Representative Pruitt mentioned earlier, the social emotional part of this can't be discounted. These kids have to learn how to share. They have to learn how to get along. They have to learn how to take turns. These are all important skills that will allow them to be successful as much as reading, writing, and arithmetic does. In fact, there was an interesting study done out of Tennessee, and there was an article in the New York Times that said why the average kindergarten teacher should be paid $600,000 a year. I don't know if you saw that. I would go and Google it. It's a fascinating article and study, but it looked at every factor that could possibly be conceived about why somebody becomes a healthy, productive adult who's contributing to both the economy and has a healthy, stable family life. And the one thing that they could tie it back to, the only deciding factor, was that they had a great kindergarten experience. Now, it wasn't pre-K, but it was still kindergarten, and these were still little kids. So we can't discount the importance of what happens in these early years. I think too often we look at them, and they're cute and cuddly, and they're so fun, and they're saying silly things, and we want to believe, because it's easier to believe, because it's one less thing to have to worry about, that it doesn't matter at this age. But the truth of the matter is, it matters the most. It's just like building a house. You don't start with a crappy foundation. You put the foundation in first, you build it as solid as possible, and then the cracks don't show up later. Remediation costs far more than it does to do it right the first time. So part of the call to action that we have is to get people informed about the data. There's so much data out there, and we are here to share it with you so that we can continue to fight for what's right for our kids, and that's an early learning experience that matters. Thank you.
Ms. Blank, thank you so very much for your passion for our kids. I do want to reiterate that you hit the nail on the head, I think, because most of the teachers that I talk to, the biggest problem in the classroom is discipline. Well, you just said that emotional connection in early ages has a lot to do with control in the classroom, which makes it easier to learn. So that's a very good point you made. Any questions for Ms. Blank? David? Representative David Wilkerson?
Chairman. I'm still trying to gather, I guess, as far as the pre-K program. Our kids just went through it about 2 years ago, and I've talked to some parents that are in it now, and I talked to teachers in elementary school who talk about the importance of pre-K. But what exactly will be lost if we cut out those 2 hours? It seems after lunch and nap, then you pick them up. But those parents that are picking them up, I guess, what will they actually lose by missing those 2 hours?
Well, that's a very good question, and one I think we're not 100% sure of at this point. I do want to introduce Mindy Benderman, who's our executive director at Gears. Mindy came from Voices for Georgia's Children. Many of you know Mindy already. She's been down here a lot. I think part of our concerns have to do with the ability to retain really high-quality teachers and make sure that they can go to a shortened workday as well, and not, need to have a full-time job. So that's one grave concern that we have. I think the other is that do we have enough time for the instructional quality? And some of that can be addressed, and we're willing to work with the governor on how do we, we mentioned that there's a lot of time going, line up, let's go to the bathroom, let's sit down, let's get in circle time, and there's ways to tighten up curriculum so that there is more, really good instructional time in that versus time wasted. So we're not saying that there has to be things lost. We're saying we have concerns. And the only way to make sure that it isn't lost is to address those concerns up front and talk about it. I don't know if, Mindy, you want to say something.
I want to add one more thing, and that's that Representative Wilkerson, you said the parents picking their kids up after that half day. We do talk about extended hours, what happens to working families. The governor has some funds in his proposal for additional aftercare, but what happens with the curriculum? In other words, are those half-day programs going to follow a full-day curriculum that we know is helpful, or is that just an aftercare program where they may do a little reading or they may throw a ball at the kids? But we need to take advantage of all the time and all the hours that we have with our children. And if that extended day isn't part of a Georgia pre-K program, we want to know how we're going to offer that quality in that rest of the day, too.
Yes, ma'am.
You may not even be the right people to ask this question of, but I'm going to try it anyway. One of my concerns and one of the glories of Georgia Pre-K is that it is this partnership between school systems and private providers. What happens to the school system day when we cut hours out of the pre-K day?
That's another concern. That's why I think Stephanie said we really need to study the possible impacts of the proposal that was announced today, and that'll be one of our questions for school administrators, because as Commissioner Cagle said, I think 56% there are 56 districts where public schools are the only providers of pre-K, and we certainly don't want to lose that. And in the ones where there is both private and public school programs offered, we want to retain a parent's choice.
Representative Harden.
I have a question. I hope my terminology is right. I believe last year, maybe in the budget cuts, that there were provisions to reduce is it resource coordinators? Is that the correct terminology? And to me, when I was looking at that, it seemed that that's a very, very important piece, because it involves a family at that young age with the student. Did that get cut, and if we go with the way we're going now, is that going to be further impacted?
Because it did get cut.
Last year, the resource coordinator program was cut, and this year, and for this school year, instead there was a program that costs less called transition coordinators that was put in place. The proposal that was announced today would cut that as well. We do agree with you that a very important part of an effective quality early childhood education involves parents as well, because parents are such an important both teacher to those children, but also constant in a child's life. What the department has said is that they can offset the impact of eliminating the program through interagency collaboration and private investment. We're looking forward to talking to them about what kinds of parent and family supports they think they can provide. Again, that's something we don't know, but we would say, and the national studies show, that family supports are a vital part of a quality program.
The other thing I would add about the family piece and why it's so critical is if you look at some of the other issues we combat in the state of Georgia, and I do wear the Children's Healthcare of Atlanta hat, I've been involved with them for the past 13 years, is we have the second largest childhood obesity problem in this state. And we know that if these behaviors can be addressed early with children, oftentimes it sets them on a trajectory to be a healthy adult. So if we have the opportunity to work with families, which very often a resource coordinator can do, we can start a whole family on some behavioral changes and lifestyle choices. So it's an important issue, not just from a learning standpoint, but also from a health standpoint, and that's critical.
Thank you, Representative Morgan. Question?
First, I want to say thank you for being here, and I appreciate your presentation and your work. I'm wondering, and this question may have been asked, I was a little bit late, but I'm trying to get a sense about the dollars and the hours being cut short. Can you talk about what is the proposed cost saving for this, and how that translates to what is happening in the classroom? So you mentioned the impact of teachers and the quality of teachers you would have in the classroom. What are the other impacts, if that's a word, directly in the classroom, or how this would impact pre-K?
Again, all I have is the governor's proposal, some notes from the governor's proposal. I understand that he estimates $54 million of savings by cutting the program to part-time, and then we'll add additional slots and the other monies we talked about for high-risk kids. That's what we know right now. Again, we would love to be able to talk about impacts of cut a full day, particularly to high-risk students, but to all students. What that means and what we don't know is, will parents be more or less likely to enroll their child in a program if it's part day versus full day? There are still some unanswered questions, and we need time to ask those questions and get some answers that we'll share with you.
What we do know at the present time is that with the additional funds that the governor is allocating, is that we're going to add 5,000 slots, and we're going to have monies available for low income for extended day, so that a lot of those will not, I don't know what that number is, but many of them will continue to stay on the full day. And he's also provided some money for transportation that wasn't in the budget originally. And again, I'd like to say thank you for coming. And the governor, he really does care about pre-K. There's no doubt about that. We're in financial situation right now, and I think it's about how can we spend our money the best. But after listening today, I fully believe that with people like you, we're going to make this work, and our kids are going to be okay. And I, too, believe that if we can get that data that we need to prove that pre-K really does work, that when the economy comes back, we will find money to fund pre-K for every child. And thank you for being here today, and I appreciate it very much.